Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today we are diving into the man behind the legend, Abraham Lincoln.
A great choice.
Yeah, we're going to be using a clip, actually, from the American History Hit podcast.
Okay.
And this is where Don Wildman interviews Callie Hawkins. She is of the President Lincoln's Cottage.
Interesting.
And our mission here is to uncover the human being, behind the myth, behind the legend, the human being who is shaped by love and loss and just an unwavering commitment to ideals.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating how Lincoln's personal life, often gets overshadowed by his political achievements.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go beyond the familiar stories and, try to understand how his experiences shaped the leader that he became.
Right, and it's easy to get caught up in that kind of larger-than-life image of him. But he was born in a log cabin in Kentucky, February 12th, 1809.
Wow.
That's only 33 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed.
He was practically a living link to the Founding Fathers.
Yeah, he was.
That's amazing.
And so he was very grounded in those early American principles, but he also recognized the need to adapt those principles for a changing nation, which is, I think, something that a lot of leaders struggle with.
Yeah, finding that balance.
Right. And speaking of balance, his family dynamics were pretty interesting. A judgmental father, who really clashed with his love for learning, the loss of his mother at a very young age.
I think those early losses, really shaped him. They probably, fostered his self-reliance, his ability to spot, insincerity, his willingness to kind of challenge both himself and others. He really had to forge his own path intellectually and emotionally.
I never thought about that, but that's a really good point. So he really had to develop this kind of inner strength because he had to navigate all these really, really difficult relationships.
Exactly.
In his formative years.
And then there was his stepmother, who actually encouraged his intellectual pursuits. A stark contrast to his father's disapproval.
Yeah.
So you see these kind of, competing influences shaping him from a very young age.
Right, right. That makes you wonder how those conflicts played out in his leadership style later on. Was he constantly trying to, reconcile those opposing forces that he had kind of grown up with?
Absolutely. That's something worth exploring.
Right.
And then, of course, you can't forget the influence of Mary Todd Lincoln.
Right.
She came from a wealthy slave-owning family. She was incredibly sharp politically. There's that famous quote attributed to her, where she says, "Any husband of mine would have been president of the United States."
Oh, wow. Okay. Talk about ambition. Right.
Right.
Whether or not that quote is actually accurate.
Right.
It really kind of, I think, reveals a lot about her personality.
Oh, absolutely. She was definitely an engine for his ambition, recognizing his potential and pushing him towards greatness. But of course, their relationship also went through just unimaginable trials. They lost two of their sons during his presidency.
And those tragedies, they must have just taken such a toll on both of them. We talk about Lincoln's melancholy, his what we would now probably call depression.
Right.
But Mary Todd also faced, really harsh criticism for her own struggles.
It's a real reminder of the double standards of that era. Right. Societal expectations for men and women were just so different.
Yes.
Especially when it came to expressing grief and
And processing it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It just makes you think, how did they cope with such immense personal losses while shouldering, the weight of a nation on their shoulders, literally?
Yeah. And it wasn't just private grief,
No.
The whole country was grappling with the horrors of the Civil War. Think about Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman's description of Lincoln's face. He talked about the deep-cut lines and the latent sadness.
It's such a vivid image.
Right.
This wasn't a marble statue, this was a real man carrying just, these unimaginable burdens. And our source calls Lincoln the quintessential bittersweet, somebody who could hold immense sadness, but also, this powerful aspiration to make things better.
It's a great way to put it.
I think so, yeah.
And amidst all of this turmoil, all of this personal and national turmoil, Lincoln actually found some solace at his cottage.
Oh, right.
It was a 34-room estate on the grounds of the U.S. Soldiers' Home, and it really became his refuge from the pressures of the White House.
Can you imagine? The President of the United States needing to escape just 3 miles away from the White House to just get some peace and quiet.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
It really speaks to what life must have been like in the White House.
Right.
During those really turbulent times.
And it was a lot. He spent a quarter of his presidency there. especially, during the summer months. And the cottage actually bookends his time in office.
Oh, wow.
So his first visit was just a few days after his inauguration,
Uh-huh.
and his last ride there was the day before his assassination.
Wow, there's a real haunting symbolism to that,
Yeah,
isn't there?
yeah, there is. But, before we get to the tragic end, I do want to share this story, about Lincoln kind of riding to the cottage alone one day. There was a young woman and her father, and they came across this what they described as a rusty, dusty old farmer on horseback, only to realize it was, the President of the United States.
That is a great story.
It's crazy, right? I mean, could you imagine that happening today?
Absolutely not. No, it's just such a different time. The president just, riding around unescorted. It's wild.
Yeah, a man on a horse.
Just a man on a horse. It really highlights how accessible he was, I think, compared to presidents today.
Right. It's just amazing.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears for a second and talk about, one of Lincoln's relationships that's been kind of the subject of much debate.
Okay.
And this is his friendship with Joshua Speed.
Interesting.
They shared a bed actually above Speed's store for several years, which has led to a lot of speculation.
Right, of course. It's a question that often comes up, but I think applying modern labels to a 19th century dynamic like that can be a little misleading,
Right, right. And our source mentions homosocial love, which was a term that, people understood in that era.
Yeah.
So it does kind of make you wonder, so what if he was?
Right.
Should we really be trying to, categorize his relationship through a modern lens?
I think it's a valid point. Trying to impose our current understanding of relationships onto the past is tricky. I mean, we really have to consider the historical context. Absolutely. And even if I can't definitively answer that question, I still think it's really fascinating to think about, how these relationships might have shaped his worldview.
Sure.
What stands out to you about that dynamic?
Well, what's interesting to me is how Lincoln's letters to Speed reveal, his curiosity about the intimate details of Speed's marriage.
Interesting.
And I think it suggests a certain, yearning for connection, for understanding, even as he navigated his own complex relationships.
Sadly, we know that connection was cut short.
Hmm.
He was assassinated at Ford's Theater
Tragically.
on Good Friday,
Yeah.
April 14th, 1865, just days after the war ended.
It's hard to believe.
And to make the tragedy even more profound, Mary Todd, his wife, witnessed the murder.
Yeah, it's just such a level of trauma it's difficult to even begin to comprehend,
Right, right.
To have already lost 2 children and then to see your husband, the president of the United States, shot right next to you. I mean,
Unfathomable.
it's just awful.
And as if that wasn't enough, she was also initially denied access to his body.
Oh, that's just awful.
Yeah.
It always gets to me, that detail. It's just, even as the first lady during this national crisis,
Right.
she was still subject to these societal constraints placed on women at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I think it just really highlights those double standards,
Yeah.
All those whispers about her mental health, the way she was treated. It's just a stark reminder of the injustices women often faced.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that, history isn't just about big events and famous figures.
No.
It's also about the personal stories, the experiences, the often overlooked experiences of the people who lived through those times.
And it's like we're trying to look through a different lens, right?
Right.
When we're looking at these events.
Exactly.
To try to understand, the human impact of these big historical moments.
That's what makes exploring figures like Lincoln in a more, humanized way so valuable, I think.
It allows us to really connect with them on a deeper level, to understand their complexities, to understand their flaws, to understand the challenges they faced.
And in doing so, we gain a much richer understanding of history itself, It becomes more than just dates and battles and names.
You're right.
It becomes about people,
Yeah.
About their motivations, their struggles, how they shape the course of events.
And it makes it more relatable, the personal stories, the glimpses into their lives. That's what makes us want to keep learning and exploring.
Absolutely. That's what I love about, kind of what we're doing here with this deep dive,
Yeah.
We're not just reciting facts, we're engaging with the human story behind them,
Exactly.
We're trying to, understand the emotions, the motivations, the experiences that shaped who they were.
And through that understanding, we can maybe learn something about ourselves, how we deal with our own challenges, how we make sense of the world around us.
I think it's all about finding those threads of connection, those moments of recognition that remind us that history isn't just a collection of stories.
Right.
It's a reflection of who we are.
And who we might become.
Exactly.
It's so interesting. I keep thinking about that, image of Lincoln's face, the deep lines, the sadness in his eyes. I mean, it's haunting, but it's so powerful at the same time.
I think it really reminds us of, the weight that he carried.
Yeah.
The burdens of leadership, the grief, the pressures of war.
But even amidst all that darkness, there was this glimmer of hope, this belief in a better future. And I think that's the enduring legacy of Lincoln, right? He embodies that duality,
right?
The sorrow and the aspiration, the challenges, and the unwavering determination to kind of lead this nation through its darkest hour.
And it's a story that continues to inspire us today. It reminds us that even in the most challenging times, there's always hope for a brighter future.
I agree with that. But that hope doesn't come without effort, without sacrifice, and without a willingness to, confront that darkness.
Right. And I think, Lincoln's life really demonstrates that leadership isn't just about power or authority.
Right.
It's about empathy. It's about compassion. And it's about a genuine commitment to the well-being of others.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity, and bridging divides.
Exactly.
Working together to build a more just and equitable society.
It's about holding on to that flicker of hope, even when the world seems, incredibly bleak.
Right.
And striving for a better future. For ourselves. For future generations.
That's a legacy worth fighting for.
It is.
Yeah, and a legacy that I think continues to inspire and challenge us even today.
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Abraham Lincoln.
It's been my pleasure.
So insightful. I know that, we only got through, a small portion of his life.
We barely scratched the surface.
But I think it really kind of reveals how complex he was. And I'm very interested to learn more about, how those personal experiences influenced his approach to leadership and ultimately shaped his legacy. So we're gonna take a quick break, and then we will come back to delve into that.
Sounds great.
It's really amazing how Lincoln managed to balance those personal tragedies with the immense pressure of leading a nation at war.
I think it speaks to a certain level of, compartmentalization. This sense of duty that allowed him to kind of, focus on the task at hand even while grieving.
Right. It makes you wonder, what might have been if he had lived to see the peace that he fought so hard for. What would like a post-war presidency under Lincoln have looked like?
Yeah, that's a question historians still debate today. Because his assassination it left this huge void.
Right.
And Reconstruction played out, very differently than it might have under his leadership.
Right. Going back to that night at Ford's Theater, I can't even imagine what it must have been like for Mary Todd to witness her husband's murder.
It's a level of trauma that's just so difficult to comprehend.
Yeah.
To have already lost 2 children and then to see your husband, the president, shot right next to you. I mean,
and then on top of that, to be denied access to his body immediately after.
That's the part that always gets to me. Even as First Lady during this national crisis,
right?
She was still subject to these societal constraints placed on women at the time.
It's heartbreaking, but it also it really highlights those double standards that we were talking about before. All the whispers about her mental health, the way she was treated. It's a reminder, of the injustices women often faced.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember, that history isn't just about big events and famous figures, right?
No.
It's also about the personal stories, the often overlooked experiences of the people who lived through those times.
It's like we're trying to look at history with a different lens, I guess.
Right, exactly.
Trying to understand the human impact of these big historical moments.
And I think that's what makes exploring figures like Lincoln in a more humanized way so valuable. It allows us to really connect with them on a deeper level, to understand their complexities, their flaws, the real challenges they faced.
And when we do that, I think we get a much richer understanding of history itself. It becomes more than just, dates and battles and names.
Right.
It becomes about people, you know, their motivations, their struggles, how they shaped the course of events and the personal stories, those little glimpses into their lives. I think that's what makes us want to keep learning and exploring.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about, kind of what we're doing here,
Yeah.
with this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're not just reciting facts, we're engaging with the human story behind them.
Right.
We're trying to understand the emotions, the motivations, the experiences that shaped who they were.
And through that understanding, we can maybe learn something about ourselves.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, how we deal with our own challenges, how we make sense of the world around us.
I think it's all about finding those threads of connection, those moments of recognition that remind us that history isn't just, a collection of stories.
Right.
It's a reflection of who we are.
And who we might become. You know. It's so interesting. I keep thinking about that image of Lincoln's face. The deep lines, the sadness in his eyes. It's haunting, but it's so powerful at the same time.
I think it really reminds us of, the weight that he carried.
Mm-hmm.
The burdens of leadership, the grief, the pressures of war.
But even amidst all that darkness, there was this glimmer of hope, this belief in a better future. And I think that's the enduring legacy of Lincoln, right?
Yeah.
He embodies that duality, the sorrow and the aspiration, the challenges and the unwavering determination to kind of lead this nation through its darkest hour.
And it's a story that continues to inspire us today.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even in the most challenging times, there's always hope for a brighter future.
I agree with that. But that hope doesn't come without effort, without sacrifice, and without a willingness to, confront that darkness head on.
Right. And I think, Lincoln's life really demonstrates that leadership isn't just about power or authority.
Right.
It's about empathy. It's about compassion. And it's about a genuine commitment to the well-being of others.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity.
Exactly.
And bridging divides, working together to build a more just and equitable society.
It's about holding on to that flicker of hope even when the world seems, incredibly bleak.
Right.
And striving for a better future.
Right.
For ourselves, for future generations.
That's a legacy worth fighting for.
It is.
Yeah, and a legacy that I think continues to inspire and challenge us even today.
Absolutely.
So as we continue to kind of delve into this deep dive, into the complexities of Lincoln's life,
right.
I think it's important for us to also consider the personal toll that this journey took, on him and on those closest to him. It's easy to focus on the grand narratives of history, the battles, the political triumphs, but it's so important to remember that behind those narratives are real people with real lives experiencing, joy and sorrow and love and loss,
right.
hope and despair, and in Lincoln's case, those personal experiences were so deeply intertwined with his public life. They shaped his decisions and they really left this lasting impact on his legacy. So let's shift our focus a little bit to the human side of Lincoln, the man behind the myth. The father, the husband, the friend, navigating life and love amidst the chaos of war and the weight of a nation's hopes and dreams, and by understanding his humanity, I think we gain a deeper appreciation for his greatness. His ability to lead with compassion, to persevere through adversity, and to inspire a nation to strive for a better future. So let's delve into those intimate details of his life, uncovering those stories that really reveal, I think, the true depth of his character and the enduring power of his legacy.
And perhaps in doing so, we'll discover something profound about ourselves.
Yeah.
About leadership, about the human capacity for resilience and empathy and hope.
So let's continue our journey into the world of Abraham Lincoln, a world that's both familiar and unknown, a world that continues to captivate our imaginations and challenge our understanding of history and of ourselves.
It's a journey that I think will take us to the heart of American history and to the heart of what it means to be human.
We were just talking about Lincoln's personal life and how those experiences shaped his leadership, let's go back to his childhood for a second. He was born into poverty on the American frontier, and he faced a lot of hardship early on.
It's a stark contrast to the image we often have of him as this like larger than life figure.
Right.
He had a difficult relationship with his father, a man who didn't understand or support his intellectual curiosity.
Right. I mean, imagine young Lincoln just, poring over books by candlelight.
Right.
While his father's pushing him toward, more practical pursuits. It's almost like a classic story of, the brilliant outsider who finds solace in the world of ideas.
Exactly. And that dynamic, it likely fueled his ambition.
Right.
And really shaped his views on social mobility. He had to forge his own path, both intellectually and emotionally.
It's remarkable how those early challenges really shaped his character. He developed this incredibly sharp wit, a deep understanding of human nature, and this ability to connect with people from all walks of life.
And those qualities, they proved invaluable in his political career.
Right.
Allowing him to navigate the complex world of Washington, D.C., and to unite a nation that was so deeply divided.
And even as he, rose to the highest office in the land, he never forgot his humble beginnings.
Right.
He remained grounded. He remained relatable.
Yeah.
Always mindful of the struggles of ordinary Americans.
I think, that empathy, that deep connection to the human experience, it's really what made him such an extraordinary leader.
Right.
He understood the hopes and the fears of the people he served, and he fought tirelessly for their rights and freedoms.
But even as he led the nation through the Civil War, he experienced another profound personal tragedy: the death of his young son, Willie.
I mean, the grief must have been overwhelming.
Right.
Especially, coupled with the immense pressure of leading a nation at war.
It's heartbreaking to think about. I mean, the Lincolns, grieving parents.
Yeah.
In the midst of a national crisis. And yet they persevered, drawing strength from each other and their commitment to the cause of union.
It's remarkable, their resilience. I think it reminds us that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can endure.
Right.
And even find a way to thrive.
Lincoln's story isn't just about, political victories and historical milestones.
Yeah.
It's a story about the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity,
Right.
to find meaning in suffering, and to leave behind a legacy of hope and inspiration.
His story resonates with us on a deeply personal level, even today. He shows us that leadership is about more than just power and authority.
Absolutely.
It's about compassion, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to doing what's right, even when it's difficult.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Abraham Lincoln, I want to leave you with this question.
Okay.
What can we learn from Lincoln's life? How can his example inspire us to face our own challenges, to bridge divides, to work towards a more just and equitable world?
It's a question worth pondering. I think his story reminds us of the importance of resilience, of finding hope even in the face of unimaginable loss, and the power of leading with compassion and understanding. It's a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us even to this day.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.